Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, you are about to step into a world where stars hum softly and music flows in silence. A story waits for you, a tale of wonder, of a magical violin, and a girl named Astrid who listens to the unspoken songs of the cosmos. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Lie back, let your body sink into your bed, and breathe in slowly, in and out. Let the tensions of the day drift away, leaving only calm, curiosity, and openness. If you enjoy gentle tales, magical adventures, and stories that carry you softly into sleep, don't forget to subscribe to Whispers of the Night and click the bell so you never miss a whisper that lulls you into dreams. Tonight, let's take a quiet journey together to the stars, to the music, and into wonder. Close your eyes now. Let your body sink into the comfort of your bed. Feel the weight of your limbs release, and imagine each exhale carrying away any stress, any thought, any worry. Inhale, slowly hold, and exhale. With every breath, feel yourself lighter, as if you are floating gently between night and dream. Picture a soft, golden glow far above, drifting down toward you. It surrounds you with warmth, safety, and serenity. You are held, cradled by gentle light, as invisible melodies begin to hum through the air. These melodies are soft, unspoken, felt rather than heard, like a violin's song carried by the stars. Each note vibrates softly in your chest, soothing every muscle, calming every thought. Imagine yourself standing on a quiet dock under a vast night sky. A young girl, Astrid, sits there with a glowing violin. Faint golden musical notes rise from the strings, spiraling upward, merging with the constellations above. The stars respond to each movement, twinkling in harmony with the silent music. Let your mind follow each note, floating along the ripples of a gentle lake, where moonlight shimmers on the water. Each reflection carries calmness. Each shimmer whispers comfort. Your eyelids are heavy. Now your heart beats in gentle rhythm with the silent symphony of the universe. The night is soft, endless, and serene. Every string Astrid touches sends waves of light and warmth into the air. Imagine these waves wrapping around you, filling you with peace. Any tension, any restlessness melts away. Feel your body sinking deeper, as if the stars themselves are tucking you into their cosmic lullaby. Every breath, every pulse, every heartbeat aligns with the quiet, comforting rhythm of the night. You are safe. You are calm. You are ready to drift softly into the story of Astrid, the violin, and the silent symphony of the stars. The Violin of Silent Stars. Whispers in the attic. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the small, dusty windows of the old attic, casting long, golden slivers across the wooden floorboards. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, shimmering like tiny stars in the warm light. Astrid's footsteps creaked softly against the uneven floor, each sound amplified in the quiet, sacred space above her grandmother's house. The attic smelled of aged paper, lavender sachets, and the faintly sweet aroma of old wood, a scent she had always associated with forgotten stories and secrets waiting to be discovered. She had climbed the narrow, spiraling staircase that led to this quiet sanctuary of memories with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. Since her grandmother's passing, Astrid had avoided the attic, preferring to stay in the bright, airy rooms of the house that felt safer and more familiar. But today, a quiet insistence tugged at her curiosity, a whisper of something extraordinary that she could not yet understand. Astrid paused for a moment at the threshold, brushing her fingers along the rough wooden doorframe. Sunlight caught the edges of her hair, turning each strand into threads of gold. She inhaled deeply, savoring the mixture of scents, and pushed the heavy door open. The attic revealed itself slowly, as though it were awakening from a long slumber. Boxes of forgotten keepsakes lined the walls, stacked haphazardly and tied with fraying ribbons, their contents hinted at by faded labels in delicate cursive. A moth fluttered past her, disturbed from its long rest, and she almost smiled at its nervous dance. Her gaze wandered across the room, lingering on the relics of a life she had barely glimpsed through childhood visits. A faded velvet armchair with its stuffing peeking through, a tarnished silver candelabra, and stacks of sheet music, their edges curling with age. Music had always been a thread connecting Astrid to her grandmother, a woman of gentle hands and kind eyes who had spoken often of melodies that could heal hearts. Astrid herself had inherited that love, spending hours at her own piano, coaxing emotion from ivory keys, but always feeling that some deeper, unspoken magic remained just out of reach. It was near the far corner of the attic, tucked beneath a sloping beam and hidden under a moth-aton quilt, that she noticed it. At first, she thought it was simply an old case, worn and faded, its leather cracked and soft to the touch. But something about the way it seemed to hum softly beneath her fingertips drew her closer. She knelt beside it, brushing the dust away with careful motions. The quilt slipped from the case, revealing the object beneath. Astrid's breath caught. It was a violin, unlike any she had ever seen. Its wood was a rich, deep amber, polished to a warm glow, despite the years it had clearly spent gathering dust. The surface seemed to ripple faintly, as if holding back a hidden current of light beneath its varnish. And then, impossibly, tiny constellations shimmered along its curves. At first, she thought it was a trick of the sun, or her imagination, but as she leaned closer, the stars seemed to pulse gently, a subtle rhythm that felt almost alive. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out, hovering above the strings. The violin felt impossibly delicate, yet full of some quiet strength. as if it had endured centuries of secrets and songs without ever revealing them. She lifted it carefully from the case, cradling it as though it were a living thing. The moment her fingers brushed the strings, a soft vibration traveled up her arm, faint and insistent. It was not sound, not yet, but a sensation, almost like a heartbeat, and it made her pulse quicken. And then she heard it, or thought she did. At first, it was barely audible, a whispering that seemed to drift just beyond the edge of her consciousness. She froze, listening, unsure if the sound had come from the violin or her own mind. The whispers were soft, elusive, filled with a warmth that reminded her of her grandmother's voice. They were not words she could understand, yet somehow they felt familiar, like a lullaby half remembered. Astrid's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had always believed in magic, though quietly, with the soft faith of someone who had longed for the impossible without ever seeing it. But this was something different. The violin seemed to be alive in ways she could not name, a world contained within its curves and strings, shimmering like the night sky itself. She traced her fingers along the fingerboard, feeling the subtle vibrations ripple beneath her touch, and the whispers rose slightly. As if encouraging her to explore further, she set the violin down gently on the wooden floor and circled it, studying every angle, every curve. The scroll at the top was carved with intricate symbols, tiny enough that she could barely make them out. The F-holes were narrow and elegant, their edges catching the sunlight in a way that made the instrument appear to glow from within. It was unlike any violin she had ever seen, and yet it felt like it belonged to her in some quiet, unspoken way. Astrid sank to her knees, her fingers resting lightly on the strings again. She imagined drawing the bow across them, though she knew she would not yet, fearful of breaking something so fragile and perfect. Instead, she let her mind wander, feeling the whispers grow faintly stronger, as though the violin were sharing a secret language meant only for her. In that moment, she understood something profound. This was not merely an instrument, it was a key, a vessel for stories, memories, and melodies that had never been heard. Hours seemed to pass as she explored, running her fingers over the polished wood, inhaling its warm, faintly sweet scent, and listening to the gentle pulse that seemed to resonate with her own heartbeat. The attic had grown quieter, the sun lower in the sky, yet she hardly noticed. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the old oak tree by the window, sending dappled shadows dancing across the floor, and she felt as though the room itself were breathing with her. Her thoughts wandered to her grandmother. She could almost see her now, standing beside the attic's small window, sunlight catching her silver hair as she hummed softly to herself, the faint strains of a violin echoing in memory. Had her grandmother known about this violin? Had she played it in secret, letting the stars on its surface guide her music? Astrid felt a sudden, aching connection, as if she had stepped into a world her grandmother had once walked, one filled with wonder and quiet magic. She closed her eyes, letting her hands rest gently on the instrument. The whispers seemed to form shapes in her mind's swirling constellations, soft arcs of light and patterns that she could not name but instinctively understood. Each pulse of the violin was a heartbeat, a rhythm that called to her own, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had never experienced anything like it before. The sense of a living memory, a music waiting to be born, and a secret world hidden within something as ordinary and yet as extraordinary. As a violin, a sudden breeze stirred the curtains at the attic window, bringing with it the faint scent of the garden below, lavender, earth, and something undefinably sweet, like memory itself. Astrid shivered, feeling a thrill of both awe and trepidation. She did not yet know what this violin wanted of her, or what she might discover in its whispered constellations. Something precious had found her, and she was no longer the same. Tentatively, she lifted the bow that had rested in the case beside the violin. It was lighter than she expected, its wood smooth and worn, as though it had been guided by countless hands before her. She drew it across the strings lightly, almost experimentally, and the sound that emerged was unlike anything she had ever heard, a soft, crystalline note that seemed to linger in the air, carrying with it the faint shimmer of stars. It was not merely music, it was a whisper, a greeting, and a promise all at once. Astrid's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of wonder. She had always loved music, but this was a language older than words, older than memory, and intimately familiar in ways she could not explain. She pressed the violin closer to her heart, feeling the pulse beneath her fingers, the whisper of stars along its surface, and the delicate, invisible threads that seemed to connect her to something vast, infinite, and alive. Outside, the afternoon light began to wane, and the attic grew dusky, but she hardly noticed. She was immersed in a world of constellations, whispers, and music that had waited patiently for her to arrive. The violin had chosen her, she realized, and in its silent, shimmering magic, it would guide her, reveal secrets, and perhaps teach her things she had not yet dreamed of. Astrid knew she could not leave it behind, could not put it back into the case and ignore its call. She would carry it with her, protect it, learn it, and in time, perhaps uncover the stories it held, the music that had been waiting to awaken. And as she lifted it once more, listening to the soft hum of its pulse and the faint whispering of its stars, she understood that her life, her music, and her heart had been irrevocably changed. The attic, the dust, the forgotten treasures, they were no longer merely memories of her grandmother. They were the beginning of a journey, a quiet, magical adventure that stretched out before her, shimmering like constellations across a velvet sky. And in that moment, Astrid smiled. She had found more than a violin. She had found a secret, a companion, and a whisper of the infinite, hidden in the gentle curve of polished wood and the faint shimmer of stars. The attic seemed to exhale, the dust settling gently as if to say, "Welcome, Astrid. The music has been waiting for you." First Song of the Stars. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall, arched windows of Astrid's room, dusting the wooden floor with soft light. Outside, the garden was waking. Birds trilled their delicate songs, and the wind stirred the branches of the old oak that had stood sentinel for generations. Astrid sat cross-legged on the floor, the violin cradled carefully in her lap, the bow resting beside it like a quiet promise. She had spent the entire night in the attic, exploring every curve of the instrument, marveling at the faint constellations shimmering across its polished surface. Now, in the quiet of her own room, she was ready to try to awaken the music that seemed to hum within it. Her fingers trembled as she placed the bow against the strings, recalling the notes she had learned on the piano, the melodies that had once flowed so effortlessly from her fingertips. She drew the bow across the strings, expecting at least a soft, tentative sound, perhaps a whisper of the music she had imagined. But there was nothing. No note, no vibration in the air, only the soft scratch of the bow against the polished wood. Astrid froze, her heart sinking. This isn't right," she whispered to herself. She tried again, coaxing the bow along a different string, pressing more firmly, adjusting her fingers as she had been taught with traditional instruments. Still, silence. It was almost laughable, yet somehow she could not bring herself to laugh. The violin, she realized with a strange mixture of disappointment and awe, was not like any instrument she had ever known. And then it happened. As she sat in quiet despair, closing her eyes, she heard it not in the room, not in the air, but inside her own mind. A soft, shimmering melody began to rise, delicate and intricate, with harmonies that seemed to twist and fold upon themselves in impossible ways. It was music unlike anything she had ever played or imagined, a song that resonated deep within her chest and soul. Her heart thumped in time with it, as if recognizing a long-lost rhythm. Astrid's eyes flew open, and she glanced toward the window. The sky above was clear and bright, yet something extraordinary was happening. The first hint of evening stars, faint but steady, twinkled and shimmered as if aware of her presence. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the stars began to pulse, flickering in gentle rhythm to the melody that only she could hear. Astrid's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the connection, the invisible thread, the way the silent violin spoke, not through sound, but through resonance and presence. The violin lay in her lap, silent as ever, yet her mind was alive with the most exquisite, intricate song. Astrid realized, in that moment of revelation, that the instrument was not meant to be heard by ordinary ears. Its music was private, a secret symphony shared between her and the universe. Every vibration she imagined echoed outward in invisible waves, brushing against distant stars, brushing against constellations, and responding in twinkling bursts of light. She could almost sense the warmth of distant worlds, the subtle hum of galaxies, all entwined in the song she had begun to play. She lifted the bow again, this time with less expectation and more wonder. The moment her fingers touched the strings, the music returned, more vivid than before. It was not chaotic. Rather, it flowed naturally, as if the violin had always known her, had always waited for her touch. Notes spiraled in complex patterns in her mind, weaving together in harmonies that seemed impossibly vast. echoing the motion of planets, the pulse of distant suns, and the delicate sway of cosmic dust. Astrid closed her eyes again, letting the invisible waves of music envelop her. She could feel the whisper of constellations brushing against her thoughts, responding to her touch with faint pulses of starlight. Each note she imagined was a dialogue, a gentle conversation between her own heart and the infinite universe. And in that conversation, she felt both infinitely small and profoundly significant, a single voice among countless others in the vast, silent symphony of existence. Time became meaningless. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps hours condensed into moments. The outside world, the garden, the birds, the warm sunlight faded into a soft, peripheral hum. All that mattered was the music, the violin, and the silent stars that twinkled in rhythm with her inner melody. Astrid's fingers moved almost of their own accord, guided not by training or technique, but by the intuition of a mind and soul attuned to something far greater than herself. Occasionally, she would open her eyes, mesmerized by the subtle shimmer of constellations across the violin's surface. They pulsed gently, responding to the flow of her imagined notes, as if the instrument itself were alive with starlight. She could see tiny, radiant patterns emerge, twisting in spirals and arcs like miniature galaxies dancing on the surface of polished wood. She wanted to reach out and touch them, to trace the luminous trails with her fingertips. But each time she tried, they shimmered away, teasing her, coaxing her to simply feel rather than grasp. A soft breeze drifted in from the open window, carrying with it the scent of evening jasmine and the faint chill of approaching night. The movement of the curtains created subtle shadows across the floor, and for a moment, Astrid felt as though she were no longer in her own room, but floating somewhere between earth and sky, suspended in a world where music and stars were one. She could hear her own heartbeat clearly, matching the rhythm of the song in her mind, and she realized that the violin was not merely an instrument, but a mirror, reflecting her inner self and the infinite universe beyond. As the hours passed, Astrid began to notice patterns within the music, small, recurring motifs that seemed almost alive. One moment, a delicate trill would rise like the whisper of wind through leaves. The next, a deep, resonant chord would pulse like the slow heartbeat of a distant planet. She sensed a subtle conversation between the notes, a dialogue that existed entirely within the realm of her imagination, but felt as real as the solid wooden floor beneath her knees. She wondered if this was what her grandmother had meant when she spoke of music that could heal hearts, bridge worlds, and touch the invisible threads of the cosmos. And then, without warning, she laughed a soft, incredulous sound, a mixture of joy and amazement. It was absurd. She realized that an instrument so silent to the world could be so alive to her. Yet she understood with a quiet certainty that this violin had chosen her for a purpose she could not yet name. It was teaching her something profound, that music was not always about sound, nor about performance, nor about applause. Sometimes music existed as a private language, a resonance that connected heart to heart, mind to mind, and soul to the silent universe that stretched far beyond human perception. Astrid leaned back against the pillows she had arranged on the floor, her hands still resting lightly on the strings. She felt tired, yet exhilarated, as though she had glimpsed a secret garden behind a hidden door. The stars outside continued to twinkle, faintly, as if approving, and she felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. The violin was not merely a possession or a tool. It was a companion, a guide, and a gateway. She did not yet know the full extent of its magic, but she sensed, with every pulse of starlight, that her life had changed forever. The first song of the star, she thought, had been heard not by the world, not by her ears, but by the silent universe itself, and by her, and she had been a part of it. As dusk settled over the garden, bathing her room in soft lavender shadows, Astrid felt a quiet certainty grow within her. The violin would teach her more than she could imagine. It would show her worlds unseen, guide her through melodies that no human ear could hear, and illuminate the hidden symphony of the stars. And perhaps, one day, she would find a way to share that music, though she knew it would never be ordinary, never audible in a conventional sense. It would exist in the private spaces between thought and imagination, between heartbeat and cosmos, and it would be hers. She closed her eyes once more, letting the invisible melody flow through her. The first song of the star lingered in her mind, delicate yet immense, a silent river of light and sound, calling her onward. Somewhere deep in the night sky, the stars twinkled in time with her heartbeat, a subtle cosmic applause. And Astrid, cradling the violin in her lap, smiled, ready for the journey that had only just begun. Echoes of forgotten dreams. The sun had barely risen over the rooftops of Astrid's town, casting a soft pink glow across cobblestone streets and terraced rooftops. Morning fog lingered in the alleys, curling around corners like a silent visitor, and the scent of fresh bread from the bakery mingled with the crisp, cool air. Astrid stepped outside, cradling the violin in her arms. Unlike yesterday, when she had explored its magic alone in her room, today she felt an irresistible urge to take the instrument into the world, to see how its silent music might ripple beyond the quiet of her home. Her footsteps were light on the cobblestones, the violin resting against her shoulder as she imagined the bow moving across the strings. In the past, her music had always been confined to her piano or the imaginary melodies she held in her mind. But now, even without producing sound, the violin seemed to hum with invisible life, vibrating with energy that reached beyond her own senses. Astrid felt the pulse of the instrument, subtle yet insistent, urging her to explore, to connect. She walked slowly down the familiar streets, noticing details she had overlooked countless times: the intricate carvings of the old lampposts, the faded murals on the sides of brick buildings, the way morning sunlight caught the dust in the air, making it glow like a field of tiny stars. Then she tried it. She lifted the bow, imagining it drawing out the silent music, and immediately she sensed something extraordinary. It was subtle at first, a flicker of emotion, a ripple in the air around the people she passed. The baker, kneeling at his early dough, seemed to pause, a faint smile softening the lines of his tired face. Across the street, a young girl chasing a stray cat hesitated mid-step, her worry dissolving for a brief instant. Astrid blinked, unsure if it was her imagination, until the ripple expanded and she realized that the violin was responding not just to her thoughts, but to the hidden currents of emotion around her. Every step she took seemed to carry the invisible music outward, a soft pulse that moved through the town like sunlight through morning mist. She felt, with increasing clarity, that the instrument was not merely producing sound, it was perceiving, interpreting, and reflecting the unspoken feelings of those around her. Memories, long hidden or half forgotten, began to shimmer faintly in her awareness. A man sitting on a bench seemed suddenly to revisit the laughter of his childhood, a memory of chasing fireflies in a summer field. An elderly woman tending flowers in her window leaned back, her hands trembling slightly, and Astrid sensed the quiet sorrow she carried for someone long gone. The violin communicated with a subtlety that words could not reach. Each imagined note carried a message of empathy, a gentle acknowledgement of lives unseen. Astrid's heart swelled as she realized the depth of its magic. She was not merely observing emotions, she was participating in them, offering comfort without touching, understanding without speaking. The invisible music was a bridge between her and the lives around her, a silent conduit for connection. She wandered further into the town square, where the market was beginning to stir. Merchants laid out their wares, and the clatter of crates and soft chatter of early customers mingled with the scent of fresh fruit and herbs. Astrid moved among them, bow in hand, imagining the flow of music. She noticed subtle changes. A weary customer straightened, lifting the corners of her mouth in a small, unspoken smile. A vendor paused mid-task, his eyes softening as he recalled a memory he had not thought of for years. These were not miracles, not in the grand sense, but tiny acknowledgments, echoes of forgotten dreams surfacing in response to her silent melodies. Astrid felt her own pulse align with the rhythm of the town, the heartbeat of lives unfolding around her. It was mesmerizing the way the violin seemed to sense pain, joy, longing, and nostalgia, weaving them into invisible chords that she alone could feel. She passed a child sitting alone on a bench, hugging her knees tightly. The moment Astrid lifted the bow, the violin's silent song reached out, and she felt a subtle warmth emanate from the girl, a flicker of courage and hope. The child looked up, eyes wide, and Astrid smiled gently, feeling an unspoken connection. No words passed between them, yet the message was clear. You are seen. You are not alone. As the morning unfolded, Astrid began to experiment, noticing how the music could shift in tone depending on her focus. A gentle, flowing melody seemed to ease tension, while a more intricate pattern revealed buried joy. She discovered she could follow the subtle threads of emotion, tracing them from person to person, witnessing memories that had faded into shadows. She saw lovers remembering the first time they had held hands, parents recalling lullabies sung to children long grown, and friends laughing at jokes no longer spoken aloud. The violin allowed her to perceive these echoes not as intrusion, but as a shared experience, delicate, mutual acknowledgement of hidden truths. Astrid marveled at the complexity of the world she had never noticed. The town was alive with silent stories, invisible currents of feeling that shaped the rhythms of daily life. And now, with the violin in her hands, she could participate, her imagination acting as both instrument and conduit. She realized that music was not just a personal expression. It was a bridge, a way of tuning in to the subtle harmonies of others' hearts and minds. Hours passed like a dream. Astrid wandered through quiet alleys, along sun-dappled streets, and into the small park where the fountains sparkled in the morning light. The invisible notes of her music swirled around the people she passed, brushing gently against memories and emotions. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not only for the violin and its cosmic magic, but for the privilege of witnessing the hidden depth of human lives, so often overlooked in the rush of ordinary days. Eventually, she found herself sitting on a low stone wall, resting the violin on her lap. She closed her eyes and let the silent music flow freely, without direction or expectation. The world around her seemed to breathe in response, subtle shifts of emotion and recollection dancing like sunlight on water. And then she understood something deeper. The violin was not just a tool for perception, it was a form of healing. By acknowledging hidden dreams, unspoken fears, and silent joys, she was offering a gift far beyond melody, a reminder that every life mattered, that every heart contained beauty, even in sorrow, and that connection could exist without words. As the sun reached its zenith, casting a warm glow over the town, Astrid opened her eyes. People passed without noticing her, unaware of the delicate symphony playing just beyond their perception. Yet she did not feel disappointed. The magic of the violin was not in recognition or applause, but in the quiet, invisible impact it could have. She had touched lives without speaking, healed hearts without touching, and shared a moment of silent understanding with countless souls. The town itself seemed different to her now, more alive and vivid, as if the invisible currents of emotion had always been there, but had been invisible to ordinary eyes. She realized that the violin had chosen her not merely to explore its music, but to witness and nurture these hidden stories. It was a responsibility she accepted with both awe and humility. As afternoon approached, Astrid returned home, walking through the quiet streets with a lightness she had never felt before. She paused at the edge of the garden, the violin cradled gently, and let the fading rays of sunlight touch her face. She thought of all the hidden dreams she had glimpsed, all the quiet emotions she had acknowledged, and felt a profound sense of connection to her town, to her world, and to the universe itself. The violin was no longer merely an instrument or a mystery. It was a language of empathy, a key to understanding, and a companion in the silent symphony of life. That evening, As twilight settled over the rooftops and the first stars appeared in the deepening sky, Astrid placed the violin carefully on her bed and gazed out the window. Tiny constellations shimmered faintly on its surface, responding to the light of the real stars above. She smiled, feeling the gentle pulse of the instrument beneath her fingertips, even when she was not touching it. The echoes of forgotten dreams lingered in her mind, and she knew that tomorrow and every day after, she would continue this delicate journey, playing silent music, listening with her heart, and learning the infinite language of the violin and the universe. For the first time, Astrid understood that music did not always require sound, that communication did not always require words, and that even in silence, there was a depth of understanding, connection, and healing that could touch lives in ways no ordinary melody ever could. The violin had opened a door to a world unseen, and she had stepped through it, ready to explore the infinite possibilities that lay beyond the visible, beyond the audible, and deep within the quiet music of human hearts. The night that hung between worlds. The night arrived slowly, drawing a violet-blue curtain across the sky. The streets of Astrid's town were quiet, wrapped in the soft sigh of midnight winds and the occasional distant bark of a dog. Even the stars seemed unusually bright, gleaming with a clarity that made the familiar constellations feel like old friends, yet somehow more alive. Astrid clutched the violin to her chest as she walked along the cobblestone lanes, a sense of anticipation prickling at the edges of her awareness. She felt the pulse of the instrument beneath her fingertips, a gentle rhythm that seemed more insistent tonight, as if calling her somewhere she did not yet understand it. Was in the shadow of the old clock tower that she first saw the figure. At first, he seemed like a trick of the moonlight, a silhouette formed by the interplay of street lamps and mist. But as she drew closer, she recognized him, tall and lean, wrapped in a long coat that seemed to shimmer faintly like the night sky, his face partly hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a violin case like hers, though it appeared far older, its surface etched with strange, celestial symbols that pulsed with faint silver light. Astrid's breath caught, the pulse of her heart matching the soft vibrations she felt from her own instrument. "You found it," the stranger said, his voice low and melodic, echoing slightly as if it carried the weight. "The violin chooses carefully, and it has chosen you." Astrid's fingers tightened around the bow, unsure whether to speak or simply listen. The man stepped closer, revealing eyes that seemed impossibly bright, reflecting constellations within their depths. "I am called Arinder," he continued, "and I am a guardian of the music that has been lost in the cosmos. You hold it now, though perhaps you do not yet understand the responsibility that comes with it." Astrid's heart thumped. "Lost music," she whispered. "You mean like songs from stars?" Arinder inclined his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "More than songs. Memories, emotions, dreams echoes of existence from worlds long vanished. The violin does not play them aloud. It carries them in silence, waiting for a hand capable of hearing them, feeling them, understanding them. Many have sought this music, but few have truly listened. He gestured toward the sky. Tonight, if you are willing, I will show you where the music comes from and why it must never be misused. Astrid's curiosity flared, mingling with awe and trepidation. She nodded, and Arender extended his hand. When she took it, a strange warmth spread through her, as if the pulse of the violin had intertwined with her very heartbeat. Together, they stepped into the shadows between the streets, and the world seemed to tilt. The ground beneath their feet softened, the town fading into a luminous haze, until they were walking along a path of faint starlight that stretched across space like a bridge between worlds. The journey was surreal. Astrid felt as though she were suspended between dreams and waking, the pulse of her instrument guiding each step. Stars swirled around them, some close enough that she could see faint, shimmering patterns across their surfaces, others distant and pale, their light reaching across unfathomable expanses. She could almost hear the silent melodies they carried, delicate threads of sound that resonated directly in her mind, merging with the pulse of her violin. Finally, they arrived at a structure unlike anything Astrid had ever seen. A great observatory rose from the void, its walls of translucent crystal refracting starlight into a cascade of colors. At its center, a massive telescope pointed toward a cluster of stars that seemed impossibly close, as though the cosmos itself had bent to allow them a glimpse. Arender gestured for her to enter. Inside, the observatory was alive with quiet energy. The floors glimmered faintly, patterned with intricate constellations, and instruments that defied ordinary understanding floated in the air, each radiating a soft, harmonic hum that seemed tuned to the pulse of the universe itself. Arender led her to a platform at the center. Here, you will learn to read the patterns of the stars, to understand the silent language of their music, he said. Each note carried in your violin corresponds to a celestial rhythm, a hidden truth of the cosmos. Astrid lifted her instrument, feeling its familiar pulse. Arender took his own case and opened it, revealing another violin, its surface etched with shifting constellations that mirrored the ones above. The music of stars is fragile, he explained. It exists in silence, and only those who truly listen may hear it. If played carelessly or for selfish purposes, the violin can vanish entirely, taking the music with it, lost to the void forever. Her pulse quickened. So it's fragile, but how can I learn to play it properly if it doesn't make a sound? Arender smiled faintly. You already have begun. The music does not depend on sound. It depends on connection. Close your eyes, feel the pulse of your violin, and imagine the melody flowing outward, responding to the rhythm of the stars themselves. Astrid obeyed, closing her eyes and letting the invisible currents guide her. At first, she felt uncertain, as if groping blindly in a vast, dark room. But gradually, she sensed the threads, subtle vibrations that rose and fell with patterns she could almost trace. Constellations that twinkled in acknowledgement, pulses of light that resonated with the melody in her mind. She imagined the bow moving across the strings, and in response, the stars seemed to shimmer in time. Tiny arcs of brilliance dancing across the void. Arender watched silently, his expression serene but intense. "The violin does not belong to you alone," he said softly. "It belongs to the music, to the universe, and to those who have been lost and forgotten. You are its temporary guardian. Treat it with reverence, and it will reveal wonders beyond imagining. Abuse it, and it will vanish, along with the music it holds." Astrid swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle gently upon her shoulders. The instrument in her hands was no longer simply a tool for imagination or private music. It was a vessel of cosmic significance, a link between her world and countless others she could not yet comprehend. She drew the bow across the strings lightly, and the pulse beneath her fingertips expanded, connecting with the observatory, with the stars, and with Arender himself. The air hummed faintly with invisible energy, a silent resonance that felt almost like a heartbeat shared across the universe. Arender spoke again, pointing toward the central telescope. "Look through this, and you will see the origins of the music. The notes are not random. They are echoes of creation, memories of worlds, feelings, and dreams. Some have been lost to time, but through your violin, they may be remembered." Astrid approached the telescope and peered through the eyepiece. Her breath caught. She saw a panorama of stars, some faint and distant, others glowing with unusual brilliance. Among them, she glimpsed patterns that seemed almost musical curves, spirals, and waves that pulsed in subtle rhythm. She could sense the melodies carried in their light, the quiet symphony of existence that had once been scattered and forgotten. The stars seemed to recognize her presence, responding to the silent music she imagined in her mind. She stepped back, her hands trembling with awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I can feel the music, but it's everywhere, and it's in everyone." Arender nodded. "Exactly. That is why the violin is so dangerous and so precious. It is a vessel, a bridge, and a mirror. You must never forget that it does not exist for personal gain. Its purpose is to carry, to heal, and to remember. You are its guardian, Astrid, as much as it is yours." For hours, they practiced together, or rather, they felt together. Arender guided her through patterns of thought and visualization. The music flowed in waves, delicate yet immense, filling the observatory with energy that was visible only to those attuned to it. Each note in her mind resonated with a cosmic truth, each imagined chord a reflection of light, time, and memory. By the time Astrid finally set the bow down, dawn was approaching. The observatory faded gradually, and the streets of her town returned around her. The stars were still visible, pale against the rising sun, but she could feel the pulse of the violin, now steady and warm, a constant reminder of the night's lessons. Arender stepped back into shadow, his figure slowly dissolving into the first light of day. "Remember what you have learned," he said, his voice a faint echo. "The music exists in silence, in understanding, and in the care with which it is held. Guard it well, for one misstep could make it vanish forever." Astrid nodded, clutching the violin to her chest. Her mind was alive with visions of stars, patterns, and silent symphonies. She had glimpsed the vastness of the universe's hidden music, and she understood, in a way she could never forget, that the violin was not merely an instrument, it was a living bridge to worlds beyond her own, a vessel of light, memory, and infinite possibility. As she walked back home, the first light of dawn illuminating the rooftops and gardens, she realized that her life had changed irrevocably. The world she had known, with its ordinary rhythms and mundane melodies, now coexisted with the infinite, silent symphony she carried in her hands. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never take the violin lightly. Its magic, its responsibility, and its connection to the stars demanded reverence. And she was ready to learn, to listen, and to protect the music of the cosmos, whatever it might ask of her. The symphony of one heart. The evening air was soft, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine and the distant sound of rustling leaves. Astrid sat on the highest terrace of her grandmother's house, the violin resting in her lap, its familiar pulse warming her hands. The sky above was a deep indigo, scattered with stars that shimmered like fragile jewels, each one a tiny world with its own story. She had practiced in private for weeks, tracing invisible melodies across the strings, feeling the subtle vibrations ripple outward. Yet tonight felt different. Tonight, she was not merely exploring the magic of the violin. She was about to confront her own heart, to test the depths of what the instrument could truly do. A sense of anticipation hummed through her, almost tangible, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. She drew the bow gently across the strings, imagining the first note flowing outward. Instantly, she felt the familiar pulse respond, not just in her hands, but in the air around her, in the spaces between the stars. The melody began to take shape in her mind, delicate and luminous, as if composed not by her imagination alone, but by the resonance of countless hearts reaching across space. She closed her eyes, letting herself be carried by the invisible currents of sound, trusting the violin to guide her. As she played, memories rose, unbidden echoes of joy and sorrow, fear and hope, loss and love. She thought of the quiet moments in her life, the times she had felt invisible or unheard, and the grief she carried from the passing of her grandmother. The violin seemed to listen, responding to each thought with delicate harmonies, weaving together the threads of emotion into a luminous tapestry. Astrid realized, with a mixture of awe and vulnerability, that the music she created tonight was not just her own, it was the resonance of all hearts willing to be heard. Outside, the night responded. Tiny pulses of light shimmered along the edges of the garden, subtle at first, then brighter, as though the stars themselves were leaning closer, eager to witness the unfolding melody. A soft breeze stirred, carrying whispers of laughter and sighs from distant memories. Astrid's fingers danced across the strings, guided by the invisible rhythm of empathy. and she sensed the presence of other souls she could not see, yet could feel. Reaching toward the warmth of her music, a grieving mother in a nearby village paused as she walked under the moonlight, sensing a strange calm settle over her chest. The loss she had carried for years, unspoken and raw, felt lighter, as if acknowledged by an unseen hand. Across the valley, an elderly man, estranged from his family for decades, felt a gentle tug at his heart, memories of long-forgotten laughter stirring within him. Astrid did not know them, could not see them, yet the violin guided her fingers as if it did. Each note, she imagined, became a bridge between hearts, a silent affirmation that sorrow could be soothed and hope could be restored. As the music swelled in her mind, Astrid felt her own fears, surfaced the doubts that had followed her since childhood, the insecurities that had made her hesitant to embrace the violin's magic fully. She imagined the bow moving with determination, the strings vibrating with the pulse of courage. The invisible symphony responded, subtle at first, then boldly, like the rising tide of a gentle ocean. Her heart opened fully, allowing every hidden fear and desire to be expressed through the melody. She understood that the true power of the violin was not in the beauty of the imagined sound, but in the sincerity of her connection, the empathy she poured into it. The world around her began to shimmer with delicate transformations. Fireflies danced more luminously, their tiny lights echoing the rhythm of the invisible notes. Trees seemed to sway in response, leaves rustling like applause in the quiet night. Astrid felt a profound connection with the universe, realizing that her music was more than a personal journey, was a language of healing and understanding. She had been given a gift, not merely to explore, but to share. Even in the silence, as she played, the magic manifested in small, subtle miracles. A stray cat, timid and wary, approached her terrace and curled at her feet, purring as if comforted by the invisible melody. A child awake in the night, restless and lonely, sat up in bed and smiled at nothing in particular, feeling inexplicably at peace. Across the village, neighbors who had long argued felt a strange warmth in their hearts, a soft empathy bridging years of misunderstanding. Astrid's music did not force change. It offered a mirror, a gentle acknowledgement that emotions could be seen, felt, and honored without words. The melody deepened, weaving intricate patterns in her mind, spiraling outward to touch every corner of the town. Astrid imagined entire constellations dancing to her rhythm, twinkling in acknowledgement, their light tracing invisible arcs across the sky. She realized that the violin's magic was not limited to individual hearts. It could touch communities, ripple across space and time, connecting the solitary threads of human experience with the broader cosmos. Each note, she imagined, carried intention, each imagined chord, a prayer of empathy, reaching across invisible distances to soothe, to heal, and to illuminate. She felt a subtle tension within herself, the knowledge that such power came with responsibility. If she misused it, if she allowed fear, pride, or selfish desire to guide the music, the violin could vanish, along with the miracles it carried. Yet she trusted the pulse beneath her fingertips, the silent guidance of the instrument that had chosen her for this purpose. With each imagined bowstroke, she reaffirmed her commitment to play not for recognition or glory, but for understanding, for connection, for light. The night deepened, stars shimmering brighter, as if celebrating the symphony she wove. Astrid allowed herself to be fully immersed, letting the invisible music carry her beyond ordinary perception. She thought of the countless unseen lives that might benefit from even a single note. The lonely, the grieving, the lost, the forgotten. She felt their silent longing, their subtle joys, their hidden dreams, and she wove them into the tapestry of her melody. The violin responded to each nuance, amplifying intention, translating empathy into a language the cosmos could understand. Hours passed in a timeless flow. Astrid's mind, her heart, and the pulse of the violin became inseparable. She felt an astonishing clarity. Music was not merely sound, not merely performance. True music was empathy. True music was light. True music was the delicate acknowledgement of life's unseen threads, a bridge between souls that could heal without a single audible note. She had begun to understand what her grandmother had hinted at all those years ago, that the power of music lay not in what could be heard, but in what could be felt. The small miracles continued. A pair of estranged friends, walking separately through the night, paused at the same spot, recognizing a shared memory in the warmth of the melody. A widow, tending a neglected garden, felt a quiet hope blossom in her chest, remembering laughter long buried. Children dreaming in their beds twitched their lips into subtle smiles. Restless nights softened into peace. Even the stars seemed to shimmer more brightly, tiny lights dancing across the fabric of night, responding to the silent symphony in ways that made Astrid's chest ache with wonder as the final imagined notes settled, fading into a gentle, glowing silence within her mind. Astrid lowered the bow. She breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of the violin slow, steady, and warm. She opened her eyes to the terrace and the quiet town below, now touched by the invisible music she had shared. The night was still, yet subtly transformed, and she could sense the lingering ripples of her melody's soft laughter, gentle sighs, faint sparks of light, echoes of hearts quietly mending, of connections rekindled. Astrid smiled, understanding at last the essence of her gift. The violin was more than an instrument, more than a bridge to the stars. It was a mirror of the human heart, a vessel of empathy and light. The music it carried could awaken courage, heal grief, and illuminate the beauty within the ordinary. She had glimpsed the profound truth that each life, each soul, was part of a larger symphony, and that her role was to participate with care, love, and humility. The first hints of dawn crept across the horizon, painting the rooftops with gold and rose. Astrid set the violin gently on her lap and rested her forehead against it, feeling its pulse one last time before the morning light overtook the night. She knew that the music would remain, not as sound, but as a living, breathing connection between hearts, visible only to those attuned to the subtle rhythms of empathy and understanding. In that quiet, transformative moment, Astrid understood that the symphony she had played tonight was not a singular event. It was a beginning, the first of many journeys into the hidden. silent music that existed between the human heart and the cosmos. Each note she imagined, each pulse she felt, would continue to ripple outward, carrying hope, understanding, and light. And she knew that she would never again regard music as merely sound. It was a language far deeper, far vaster, a symphony of one heart, echoing through countless others, connecting the human spirit to the infinite universe beyond. With the rising sun warming her face, Astrid held the violin close, feeling its pulse steady and reassuring. She was ready to continue her journey, to explore the silent symphony further, to witness and honor the hidden music of the world. And in that realization, she felt both humble and powerful, a single note in an eternal melody that stretched across stars, hearts, and dreams, a symphony of one heart shared with countless others. Stars left behind. The night had been long, filled with music that was never heard but felt in every corner of Astrid's soul. As dawn approached, the sky softened, the stars fading one by one into a pale horizon of rose and silver. Astrid sat at the edge of the meadow behind her grandmother's house, the violin cradled in her arms. The instrument pulsed quietly, steady as a heartbeat, as though it too awaited her decision. She had known this moment would come. Arender's warning echoed in her thoughts. The violin does not belong to you alone. It was a vessel of memory, a bridge of light, a fragile tether to the music of forgotten stars. It had chosen her for a time, but now, standing at the threshold of dawn, she felt its weight differently. She loved it not for its power, but for the truths it had revealed. And yet, deep in her chest, she sensed that the violin's journey might not end with her. The meadow was quiet, except for the morning breeze brushing the grass and the first calls of waking birds. A thin mist lingered along the ground, curling around her ankles, catching the light of the first rays of sun. The violin glowed faintly in her lap, constellations shimmering on its polished wood as though reluctant to leave. Astrid closed her eyes and pressed her cheek against it, breathing in its warmth. She thought of every night spent listening to its silence, of every hidden dream it had revealed, of the small miracles her music had touched. She thought of her grandmother, whose attic had held the violin, waiting for her all along. Astrid lifted the bow, her hands trembling slightly. She had played many melodies since the night she discovered the instrument, but none carried the gravity of this one. She knew, without being told, that this final song would decide the violin's fate, whether it remained bound to her or returned to the stars that had given it life. She drew the bow across the strings, and though no sound filled the meadow, the world responded instantly. A hush spread over the morning. The air grew still, the birds quieting as though pausing to listen. The mist thickened, glowing faintly as if infused with starlight, and Astrid felt the invisible melody ripple outward. She imagined a note rising like dawn itself, delicate yet unstoppable, carrying with it every emotion she had poured into the violin: wonder, grief, love, courage, and hope. The stars above, faint though they were against the brightening sky, seemed to shimmer one last time in answer as she played. The world transformed. Trails of light unfurled from the bough, weaving patterns across the meadow. The grass glistened as though jeweled with dew made of galaxies, and the trees cast shadows that swayed in rhythm with her unspoken song. Astrid's heart ached with the beauty of it, for she knew it was both a beginning and an ending. She poured herself fully into the melody, every hidden desire, every unspoken fear, every fragile joy, offering them to the silent symphony that stretched beyond her understanding. She thought of the grieving souls her music had touched, the rekindled connections, the lives that had felt lighter because of the violin's gift. She thought of the way constellations had leaned closer, listening as if they recognized her. And she thought of herself, once a girl, uncertain of her place in the world, now a guardian of music that existed beyond sound, a bridge between hearts and stars. Tears blurred her vision, but her fingers moved steadily, guided not by training but by trust. The melody built to its quiet climax, not in volume but in depth. Astrid imagined chords that resonated like the heartbeat of the universe itself, vast and tender, filled with both sorrow and wonder. For a moment, she felt everything at once: the pain of loss and the joy of connection, the silence of forgotten dreams and the brilliance of stars that would never fade. And then, slowly, she let the melody descend, each imagined note softer than the last, dissolving like starlight into morning. When she lowered the bow, the violin glowed brightly, constellations shimmering as though alive. The pulse beneath her fingertips grew stronger, then softer, like a farewell. A faint hum filled her mind, not sound, but feeling gratitude, trust, and release. The violin's light expanded outward, wrapping around her in a gentle embrace, then rising into the dawn sky like threads of silver mist. Astrid watched as it dissolved into the pale blue, scattering into 1,000 trails of starlight. For a long moment, she sat motionless, her lap empty. The violin was gone, the meadow was quiet again, the world ordinary. Yet Astrid did not feel hollow. She pressed her hand against her chest and felt the steady rhythm of her own heart. The pulse she had once felt only in the instrument now resonated within her. The music had not vanished. It had simply returned home to her, and to the countless hearts it would continue to touch in ways unseen. The sun broke fully over the horizon, spilling golden light across the meadow. Astrid breathed deeply, letting the warmth wash over her. She felt changed, though her hands were empty. She carried no instrument now, but the silent melodies lingered inside her, ready to emerge in her steps, in her laughter, in the way she looked at others with empathy and light. She understood now that the violin had never been about sound, it had been about listening, about remembering, about bridging hearts and stars. As she rose, the grass bent gently beneath her feet, and for just a moment, she thought she saw faint golden footprints glowing where she walked, fading slowly into the morning. She smiled, not in sadness, but in quiet joy. The violin had left her, but it had also left something behind. The certainty that music lived not in wood and string, but in the spaces between hearts, in the quiet courage to feel, in the light of empathy that could turn silence into a song. Astrid walked back toward the house, the mist lifting and the day beginning around her. She no longer felt the need to cling to the instrument. She carried the music within her now, and she would carry it always. The town would wake, people would go about their lives, and they might never know that a silent symphony had brushed against their hearts. But Astrid knew, and she would live differently because of it, listening more deeply, seeing more gently, and offering light wherever she could. She paused at the door of her grandmother's house, looking once more at the sky. The last star still lingered faintly, refusing to fade entirely. It flickered as if winking at her, as though reminding her that though the violin was gone, its magic remained. Astrid smiled softly, whispering her gratitude to the vast, listening silence. The door creaked as she entered, the familiar scent of wood and dust greeting her. The attic above still held its quiet mysteries, but she no longer needed to search for them. She carried the greatest mystery within herself now, a symphony without sound, a constellation of light that would guide her through every joy and sorrow ahead. Astrid climbed into her bed just as the morning sun stretched across her pillow. Her body was tired, but her heart was full. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw stars' trails of light, constellations swirling, melodies unspoken but alive. She drifted into sleep, not with grief, but with peace, for she understood, at last, that the true music of life was not something one could hold in their hands. It was something that lived inside, carried in every breath, every act of kindness, every heartbeat. And so the story ended, not with silence, but with a symphony, unending, woven into the fabric of dawn, into the hearts of those she touched, and into the infinite stars left behind. And now, as the final note of the silent violin fades into the night, remember that the magic of the stars and the music of your dreams lives quietly within you. Sleep softly, dream deeply, and let the whispers of the night guide you into peace.